We can have desecration of holy places, right? Everything is holy to some extent, right? Potentially. And so when Clark steps in the bathtub, he is shown stepping in fully clothed from head to toe. This is a desecration of the holy bath, right? Remember, the bathroom represents a sacred space we've talked about. So not adhering to proper order, ritual, or hierarchy of actions is not giving due respect toward the holy order, the holy hierarchy. In fact, he is here shown inverting the holy order. Not only does he step in with his shoes on and fully clothed in the bathtub, more precisely, he takes his clothes off after entering the tub instead of before. This desecration shocks Lois. Right, so we have desecration, we have this notion of shock, okay, and he's stepping in with his shoes on, right? That's a dirtying up of something that's supposed to be a place for cleaning oneself, right? And so you've dirtied it up more than bath water should be, right? So clearly this is desecration of the bathtub or the sacred space of the bathroom. He floods the apartment. Right, so that's, again, kind of trashing the place we get with this visual, where he drops the glasses on the ground. The glasses are shown specifically inverted, right? So he inverted his the proper order, and we see here that the place is being trashed or flooded and disrespected, right, and not treated as a sacred space right now, because that doesn't matter. What matters to him is Lois Lane at this moment, right? In Man of Steel, Lois Lane takes pictures of the holy space of the scout ship. She effectively desecrates the holy space by again bringing in her profane attitudes and motives. So we've talked about this before, but this is another example where she's coming into a sacred space, an otherworldly space, and for her profane reasons, right? Just to get something, to put something in the news, right? That's all profane. So she is penalized for her profane ways by the sacred temple guardian. Notice at first it merely is curious and keeps track of her and not sure what she is or what she's doing, as if it is a holy guardian that checks to see if one is worthy of entering the holy space. So the temple guardian is like checking first. Only when she takes a picture, she truly desecrates the area, and only then does the guardian realize she is unworthy and therefore attacks her, so penalizes her, basically, right? So Clark coming in and desecrating the sacred guardian is therefore a reprioritization or consecrating Lois as nevertheless holy despite her actions. So Clark is sort of coming in and saying, you know what, she is important, she is sacred despite her profanity. She can be forgiven, right? So she's forgiven for her profane ways. After the Capitol Hill explosion, Bruce desecrates the sacred space of Lex's building to steal the kryptonite. We see it's destroyed, trashed, ripped, and torn apart, right? The holy space is wholly desecrated here, right? Treated like trash. We see Wonder Woman, Diana, preserving a holy statue, showing respect and reverence toward it as a sacred object, juxtaposed to talk of tomb raiders.
Budget cuts, tomb raiders, now add to the list, arson.
Right? And arson being explained by the other man who is actually speaking about the temple with the arrow sent by her mother. So from his perspective, her mother is somehow being linked to desecration of a holy space. She has used desecration of a holy space as a tool. Remember that upon something being desecrated, there is a subsequent shock value. The greater the desecration, the further it can send shock waves, much in the same way that Superman screams after being punctured, or when Will Smith cussed out Chris Rock. That sent shock waves, right, throughout. So his scream really echoed in a lot like Superman. So after Lex is caught, the FBI raid his place. They're almost like a bunch of tomb raiders as well. Lex earlier makes a strong point that he kept it just the same. He kept the room exactly the way his father left it. Knowing Lex, that means every little piece in there was positioned in a specific way to kind of as in memory of the Father. As such, the FBI here kind of play the role of the profane, taking apart, dismantling, and undoing all of that preservation, thereby desecrating the holy space. We also see that presumably, since he mentioned it earlier, that he has inverted the painting. This inversion is his desecration of his Father's holy temple. So simply by putting something in its improper place or improper placement is desecration, a divestment of the sacred character of this holy thing put in this particular way. So notice it also suggests that he has placed or prioritized devils above angels. Of course, we see him later in this sort of communion-like position with a satanic figure, Steppenwolf. A truly blasphemous desecration of the holy space, a complete 180. So when you do something that's inverted from what is right, that's like the unholy of unholies. You're not only changing one small thing about it, which is itself a desecration, you're inverting the entire thing. You're flipping the whole thing upside down, which is a desecration and kind of has this shocking element to it. So we can have desecration of burial sites, right? So perhaps the first desecration in BVS, or maybe the second, which we'll talk about much later, is Clark breaking off from the burial ritual. Here, Alfred is shocked at his profane behavior. So again, we have shock, right? That Bruce broke off from that sacred ritual that he was a part of, right? So he separated off from that. In Bruce's nightmare, we see blood dripping from Martha's tomb. This is casket leakage, like a real thing I didn't even know about until I looked it up. So basically what happens is that as the body decomposes, it naturally releases gases, and if the casket is sealed too tight, there won't be the necessary airflow to reduce the internal pressure. So as the pressure builds up, it can result in casket explosion, creating an opening resulting in the casket leakage or mausoleum leakage. Now, this is interesting because this is, of course, in Bruce's dream. This is about his psychology. This is about his unconscious. And since casket explosion and leakage occurs when one does not allow for natural decomposition to take place, one gets the sense that Bruce has not properly dealt with, vented, or aired out his trauma. And so there is this latent, pent-up emotional distress that results in an explosive lashing outward. This is, of course, a reflection of his projection of his emotional pain and trauma onto Superman, which we will talk about more in other chapters. We are in Bruce's nightmare, which means night demon, and we even see the demon inside Martha's tomb. This demon is likely an allusion to the notion of an incubus who seeks to have sexual intercourse with sleeping women. In this case, the dead, i.e., sleeping body of Martha. Bruce's inner demon, therefore, desecrates, defiles the corpse and tomb, i.e., by not dealing with his trauma, Bruce desecrates the memory of Martha. Note that the incubus is also etymologically related to incubate, coming from the root meaning to lie on something, such as chickens lie on their eggs to incubate them. And the incubus lies upon their sleeping female victims, i.e., there is this negative energy that is incubating or building up inside of Bruce, a kind of Oedipus-like snare. Also note the connection between the words incubate and brood, meaning incubate feelings in the mind. That's a desecration of the holy space, right? Reflected in that leakage because they didn't take care of it properly. They didn't do the proper thing. They didn't follow a proper order of things. With the blood dripping out, we can roughly interpret this as the demon representing a desecration of the memory of Martha due to Bruce's lack of care of psychological or spiritual maintenance of the inner temple, his mind. Right? We're in a dream after all. So we see the physical manifestation of that with his inner demon destroying, i.e., desecrating Martha Wayne's tomb or the memory of her. We also have Lex doing experiments and cutting up Zod's body, right? This is also an act of desecration of a corpse. He takes the body out from the casket and defiles it for profane purposes, right? So he's just cutting something up. And so here we have experiments being done. He can do whatever he wants. He's defiling or desecrating the corpse of Zod. The Justice League also effectively commit something akin to desecration, or really just desecration. So, it can certainly be perceived as desecration by digging up a body without getting agreement from anybody, any of the loved ones, or, so Clark certainly has no say in this, right? And so nobody else really had a say. So they just chose to dig up his body. They're the tomb raiders here, right? That's why that word tomb raiders, they're raiding the tomb. They're digging up a buried body. That is kind of a classic sign of desecration, when you're digging up something holy that's been put there through some ritual process. One might say, given the context, we can understand why they would, but it still harkens back to being an act of desecration, making them effectively tomb raiders again. So the question to us is, should they have done that? Indeed, they are still penalized, by the way, for this act of desecration, as we see in Cyborg's vision, for nothing is gained without a cost, a corresponding cost. And so in his vision, there's all this bad stuff that happens from what they're actually trying to do. So reviving a body back to life, bringing it back to life, yeah, we want to say that's good, but nothing comes without a cost.
None are taken back from the darkness.
Not without giving one up in return.
And so you're also going to get the negative aspects of what they're doing. And so, this is an example of desecration, digging up, a buried body. There's also desecration of human life. So anytime someone is killed, we naturally see that as a desecration of the sacred character of human life. So first we have BVS, an obvious one, Bruce's parents. The act of holding a gun to someone's face actually is in and of itself profanation, since the gun and fire are typically associated with the phallus. So it's profane to show his phallus here, the gun, in the face of, an innocent family, right? So this visual alone is profane. You're taking something profane, a gun, and putting it in a sacred space, right? Putting it in someone's face, even, right? So whenever you see a gun close up in a movie, in someone's face, you need to think of that as desecrating some sacred element. So, you're taking something profane, a phallus, and putting it up close to someone. And so that's a disrespect, right? That's another example of this sort of desecration by disrespect, and sort of treating something like trash by showing, the phallus, in this case, the gun. So they are taking a profane object and placing it in the holy space. The further use of that gun then is the penetration of the bullet or seed, ending in ultimate desecration of the human life itself. And so we also see Anatoly's phallic weapon. Again, we have this image where it's like this profane thing, this vile, wicked thing, in this case, the phallus. Again, fire, phallus, guns, all of these things are related to each other. And so imagine the visual of Anatoly's disrespect by putting that phallus next to, an innocent mother's face, right? So this is truly, this should be jarring as we watch it. This should be truly jarring, not only because of that abstraction, but because, of course, Martha is going to be burned alive. And so we should feel that trauma associated with that, because that's like a really nasty thing to even just imagine, right? So innocent life being taken, fire, phallus being put in next to, a holy being, Martha, the mother, the innocent mother, and then subsequently a willingness to burn her alive, right, is also very much in this element of desecration of the holy. So Jimmy Olsen is also desecrated, right? So again, we have the gun in a person's face. We as the audience even see him as a character that is in some sense untouchable. So this kind of breaks the fourth wall in some sense, because we might project, as anybody who's kind of familiar with, Superman lore or the story, Jimmy Olsen's like this innocent character. Like, you're not supposed to touch Jimmy. Nothing bad is supposed to happen to Jimmy Olsen, right? And here, I think Zack Snyder chose Jimmy Olsen for this reason of this sort of fourth wall breaking of us feeling the impact of the desecration. So he needs to put in characters that we care about so we can actually understand the purpose of desecration by feeling it as much as possible. And so we have this innocent image of Jimmy Olsen. Here he's already desecrating it, that saying, by making him work for the CIA. And further, he gets shot in the face and just kind of falls dead on the ground. And so Zack Snyder has desecrated something so that we may feel, a stronger impact of, like, we're supposed to feel that, by the way. Like, it's not supposed to feel good. Maybe that's, the confusion. It's like, oh my God, why did he put Jimmy, and he shouldn't have killed him? Like, it's kind of the point, is that you're not supposed to like that Jimmy Olsen is killed, right? It's supposed to be jarring, right? So desecrating images are supposed to be jarring images, shocking images. They're supposed to shock a person. That's, when we say, oh, you're just putting that in for shock value, any director who really knows what they're doing is doing that, yes, intentionally to shock you. But, in this higher kind of organized structure of desecration. And so, as another example, we have Anatoly burning the corpses. So if the weapon and the guns and the fire is related to the phallus, then we can say burning of these corpses is sort of like pissing on corpses, right? So he's sort of pissing on their corpses. That is also desecration. That is like extreme levels of disrespect towards something that should be regarded as like holy or sacred. Like, not only did you kill them, but now you're also pissing on their grave. Like, it doesn't get worse than that. So it's like, all of these instances, again, are supposed to be jarring. It's supposed to shock you. It's supposed to be nasty, because that is the real nature of desecration. So you really need to internalize that and feel that yourself, so you can understand the sort of stakes. Another one is in Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? So the terrorist in Zack Snyder's Justice League come into the Old Bailey, the criminal court building in central London, the Holy Temple in this case, right? Willingness to kill people, and further showing a willingness to kill the sacred life of children as well to achieve their goals. So to a villain in their nihilistic and idolatrous psychosis, nothing else is sacred, nothing else worthy of protecting except perhaps their myopic notion of a golden age. So the body can be defiled, defaced, or desecrated, just as a monument or tomb can. Often there is a sense of permanency in the mark or scar. So here, for our first example, we see Zod's face not only get marked, but vividly so. It is a clear sign of desecration of his face. We also have Batman not only beat, but brand the sex trafficker Santos. Again, there is a vivid permanency associated with it, right? He's been branded. Note even the shock experienced by the cop afterwards.
Jesus Christ. He branded him.
When Batman gets ready to kill Superman, what would itself be a desecration of innocent life, he defiles his face beforehand and thus desecrates it, an image of something sacred. Superman is further desecrated, right, by the government, too ready and too quick to use the missile, desecrates an innocent life, Superman. Here we see Superman's face after being hit by a nuclear missile. His entire body has been desecrated. Note the slow reveal of a shocking image of death and decay. We have Superman in Zack Snyder's Justice League using his heat vision to cut off, therefore desecrate the idolatrous image of Steppenwolf. We also see Darkseid actually step on his decapitated head. He actually steps on Steppenwolf, an extreme show of disrespect and contempt for him. Again, as an audience member, you know it's a display of desecration when you get that sense of, wow, that was cold-hearted, or a sense that a character has crossed a line, a serious moral line, even a symbolic one. So even Steppenwolf, who has done all he has done, has already been subdued and decapitated. What more can you do with him? Well, step on him and defile his corpse, right? And so that is desecration. We also have desecration by general defacement, such as graffiti. For first example, we have Robin's outfit with Joker's desecrating spray paint. Presumably Robin was dead already when he defiled it, and so this is like desecration by show of marked disrespect of one's corpse, right? He's already dead. Joker has to rub it in by marking him up further. We have Lex, who captured Martha. He has pictures taken of her, has his men right on her face, has her eyes removed from the pictures, all to defile, dehumanize, desecrate her sacred character. It's already bad enough that she is trapped and tied up and threatened to be burned alive. He has to go further and actually defile her physical appearance. So defiling something that should be sacred, an innocent life, right? An innocent mother. We have the graffiti in the dilapidated building where Batman and Superman fight. The entire area has not been taken care of, right? We can see that very clearly. What was once presumably a nice building, even a sacred building with sacred character, with its massive columns, extreme height, and many levels, has been treated like trash, effectively, treated like garbage. We see Batman further desecrate the area by smashing Superman through each column. We see the motif of defacing graffiti even in the marketing images before BVS came out. Again, we see the eyes out and the word demon written over it. So the eyes being removed in the images with Martha portray a dehumanizing or demonizing attitude towards something that is viewed as sacred. Lex calls her the mother of a flying demon and therefore a witch, right? So the removal of the eyes is also seen on the images on the right where they demonize and dehumanize each other. Right? So Batman dehumanizes, demonizes, or desecrates the sacred character of Superman. He brands him with his own image. And Superman, in turn, dehumanizes, demonizes, and desecrates the sacred character of Batman, which is why we see the symbol branded on the other, right? So again, the eyes are not seen, so there is a lack of identity, right? The eyes are the window to the soul, and so if you remove those in an image, you're saying that this is not a person, this is not a being, this is not a real man, right? This is like a thing, this is a demon, this is a devil, right? So when you have that over the eyes specifically, and you have the opposite symbol actually branded over that individual, then that kind of reflects the idea that that is a desecration of something that is sacred by dehumanizing, right, the very identity of each of these individuals, right? So we've talked a lot about desecration. Now we turn to specific images of idolatry. And so remember, idolatry is when something profane is worshipped as something sacred, and more specifically when something is treated as God, and the true God is actually made to be lower on the hierarchy than this false God. And so that is idolatry. And so that occurs whenever there's a breaking of the covenant with the good, the right, the God, the proper order. And so for our first example, we have the abomination of idolatry as people reach out in idol worship, or idol worship, IDLE, of Superman. So if we think about this scene, Superman brought down actually the sacred being, this innocent life, right? So the innocent life should be the focus, the innocent life, the girl that's been through some traumatic experience that Superman is protecting from death and destruction, right? She was in the burning building. For some reason, focus is on Superman, and so that's an inversion of the proper prioritization. So Superman is elevated as the important thing. The innocent life, her well-being, is ignored, right? So that's idolatry, and that is an idleness with respect to the divine work. So they're concerned about what Superman can do for them, not what they can do for the innocent life that's been brought down, okay? Or just attention and focus should certainly be on that life. And that's why he was smiling before. His smile turns into confusion and this sort of problematic expression on his face that people have problems with for some reason. Oh, he's not smiling here. That's because there's this kind of extreme show of idolatry that I guess most people that have a problem with him not smiling are picking up on, is the idea that that's why he's not smiling. He doesn't want to be as an object of worship. He doesn't want to be the golden calf, and here they are treating him like a golden calf, right? His whole premise is that he wants to inspire others to do the holy work. He wants to inspire others to do good, to do the right thing. And so when they reach out to him in idol worship, they aren't doing that. They aren't inspired. They're giving up their own individual agency by projecting all spiritual responsibility on this externalized being, i.e. Superman. And so that's like a false god. That's false thinking in general, right? And so we also have a similar image here in the sense that, there's a lowering of a self around that idol worship. So these soldiers are worshiping Superman. Notice that their images are actually covered up, right? We don't see their individual selves, right? So that's very similar to the fact that, this is the Day of the Dead, and they have like skulls painted on their face. There's a soullessness that occurs. There's a giving up of individual agency that occurs whenever you put someone on a pedestal like this, whenever you have like this idol worship of some authoritative figure, some cult of personality or whatever it is. You've given up your own soul when you've done that. So you've dehumanized yourself in a kind of a willing dehumanization. And that's also similar to Zack Snyder's Justice League, where we have the parademons in that role, right? So there's this figure of idol worship. There's this dominance, this singular entity that assumes all responsibility, all spiritual responsibility, all agency is applied and projected onto this externalized being, is like, oh, this is the thing that will figure things out for me, and I can just kind of, do nothing and be on the sidelines and not answer the call of conscience personally, but this thing will figure it all out, right? So that's kind of what the sense I get from all of these images is like there's this soullessness, there's this singular authority, almost like this fascist or phallic kind of externalized entity that's kind of projects meaning for all of them, but really they've projected or sold their own souls to kind of establish that meaning. And so there's a dead, soulless, lack of individual aspect surrounding this idolatrous image. So that's pretty interesting. But even inanimate objects have this sort of feature when we project onto it the spiritual work, right? So instead of doing the spiritual work internally and trying to figure out how to, properly maintain a balanced psychology, it's instead projected onto this outer thing as like, oh, this thing will solve all of my problems. And so there's an authority placed on an external being or object, and that's a false idol, because really we're supposed to answer the call of conscience individually, and there isn't supposed to be any externalized thing that can take that place. So this is idolatry. Same with the Codex. The Codex is, at least in Zod's eyes, placed above anything else. Like everything else is meaningless. Even after Superman destroys the possibility of kind of going back to that golden age, right? That golden era of Krypton, what does Zod say? He says, "My soul, that's what you have taken from me." Again, there's this idea that when you do that, you externalize something as the most important, and everything else, nothing else matters around that. You've effectively postponed or delayed or made some excuse to not do the divine work within your own self. So all of these you can treat as connected in that sense, is that there's a soullessness or there's a projection of one's soul, a sacrifice of one's soul for the idolatrous image. And when you destroy that, then you don't have anything, right? So that's why when the idolatrous image is desecrated, or the possibility and all that it means is removed from the equation, Zod, you hear say, "My soul, that's what you've taken from me," because that is where he put his soul. That's where he put all meaning to his life, in this externalized thing. And so that's what's happening in all of these cases, right? There's a soullessness, there's a lack of individual agency, there's a lack of doing the divine work, internalizing the divine work, and kind of projecting all responsibility on some externalized agency. And so whenever you have people say stuff like, "Oh, Superman should be better than all of us," right? Superman is supposed to be better than all of us. That's a form of idolatry. And that's why I think people have problems. Superman fans like that have problems with Zack Snyder's Superman, because he's sort of, in my view, calling out that idolatry. It's like, no, he's not supposed to be better than us. The moment you put something out there as perfect or always better than us, that means you have some notion of what's good in your heart. You know what's good, and you become complacent. You use that as an excuse to be complacent, to do what is right. Right. So if you have a notion of what is ideal and what is good, then you should be doing that. You shouldn't be saying, oh, Superman will figure it out, or Superman will take care of it. I don't have to do the right thing all the time, but Superman can do the right thing all the time. That's a form of idolatry. You've placed something, you've sold your own personal agency, your own spiritual, moral agency, and individual agency, and projected it all onto this thing. And so it's, again, idolatry is, in this sense, is very connected to the idea of kind of a lack of one's soul, even. We also have the same idea with the mother boxes, right? The mother boxes are elevated as this thing that, oh, if only we had this thing, then it'll solve all of our problems. And it's a false image. It's a false god. It's a false idol. Exactly like the Codex was, exactly like the Kryptonite was, exactly like all these images are. It's like you've projected some outward thing as the thing, and you have postponed, delayed, or made an excuse for your own complacency. In that case, you've postponed the divine work. You've postponed the holy work in yourself by externalizing it in this way. So there are also images, of course, of desecration of idolatry. So Superman, in the case of Superman, it's most readily expressed in the Superman statue. So elevated as God above men, like we're like tiny little ants surrounding this idolatrous image. And Wallace Vernon Keefe, a man with no legs, climbs up the monument and spray paints or defiles or desecrates that idolatrous image. So this is desecration of the desecration of idolatry. We also have when Superman battles Doomsday, right? We have the monument again. Again, it's still idolatrous. And what does Doomsday do? He pulverizes, throws Superman right through it, because in order to desecrate this thing. So from Doomsday's perspective, of course, he doesn't care. He's like, nothing matters to Doomsday. But in that process, sometimes idolatrous images will get desecrated, as it is here, right? So the destruction of the monument, the destruction of this statue as Superman above everyone else, is false. That's a false god. And so it's been destroyed, okay? And also, right, the Codex. So the Codex is elevated by Zod, as we talked about, and everything else doesn't matter except for the Codex and what it represents, right? So bringing back the golden age of Krypton is most readily embodied in the Codex, and that's like the thing. That's the spiritual red herring for Zod, and nothing else matters. Well, Jor-El kind of inverts that, right? Has an inverted perspective. He's more natural and more in tune to the natural cycles, the idea of newness and the importance of change and new ways of doing things, because he's on firmer ground in that sense in the Citadel, and he kind of flies Haraka instead of flying some technologically advanced spaceship, right? So he's more in tune with this sort of natural order, the good order, the holy order, where he is shown here desecrating the Codex, desecrating the false idol, desecrating the golden calf, and reestablishing, reconsecrating what the good is in Kal-El. So Kal-El represents, as a newborn, as a natural newborn, represents the sort of natural newness and the ability to let go of some golden era, some nostalgia for some golden age, allowing for things to for us to let go of that so we can do new things, right? That's the natural good and humble flow of life, is to allow that process to take place. And so Zod, who has to go through spiritual work, but he doesn't want to. He wants to stay in a specific thing. So he doesn't want to do the holy work of maintenance of his psychology and balancing out, maybe his perspectives in a better way. Probably because, as well, they've been genetically engineered, so it might be even more impossible for him to do that. He's been designed for the singular purpose, and thus the problem with Krypton is they've tried to control things too much, that they forgot that sometimes you need to let go of things as well, right? We hold on to some things, we let go of other things, and we at some point need to let go of this attachment to a specific material form in sort of grandest cosmic sense, grandest kind of spiritual sense. We have to acknowledge and humble ourselves into that divine kind of natural process. We also have, upon Batman's awakening, right, when he's fighting Superman, he awakens and realizes what he's doing isn't right. And so he tosses the kryptonite spear as if it's trash, right? So tossing something is like desecrating it. It's like acting like, okay, actually this doesn't matter. So he treats it like trash, rightfully so, because that's not the thing that's going to save him. That's not the thing that's going to save the world even, right? So it's this false idol that's been desecrated by him tossing it. We also have the image of idolatry in the mother boxes in Zack Snyder's Justice League. So Zeus, as well as Superman and Cyborg, they break apart that false image. So there's a false elevation of this material possession that will, that tempts one to stay in some golden age kind of state. And the right thing, the holy work, is to destroy that false attachment, that false idol, that false elevation, and put it where it belongs. So treating it like trash, just like the kryptonite's being tossed, the mother boxes are being broken apart, and they fall to the ground like trash, like garbage, right? Because that's the false thing, that's the profane image of something holy. And so also the image of idolatry of Steppenwolf as being that kind of golden calf as well, right? He's the bull, right? The minotaur, the half man, half bull abomination, right? So all of that is true. And he kind of represents this sort of fake phallic fascist authority figure that is idolatrous, right? So again, we see the parademons kind of do anything he says, and he disrespects them, he doesn't care about them, and all agency and responsibility is on Steppenwolf here. And they have given up their souls, or their souls have been taken in this case for parademons, right? And right, the heroes, Superman as well as Wonder Woman, desecrate that sacred image, the golden calf. And so Superman cuts off one of the horns of Steppenwolf, so he sort of castrates him in that way, castrates this phallic image, as well as Wonder Woman castrating the phallic image of Steppenwolf further by decapitating him, right? And again, of course, we talked about as well how Darkseid steps on Steppenwolf, right? So that's again a further defiling or fully desecrating this unholy image. When they castrate him, they've broken that veil of the illusion of his authoritative significance, right? So all of that is in juxtaposition to this kind of show of bravado, this sort of toxic, tumescent masculinity, whatever you want to call it, is all for show, right? He's a paper tiger. He actually is not as strong as he seems in an outward sense. And so they desecrate that idolatry, pretty much, right? And so that's it for now. We'll do one more video wrapping up the section on desecration and idolatry, and then we'll kind of move on to the next section of Homo religiosus and modern man. That one will be shorter. I think that I might be able to get through that one in just one video, and then we'll finish off the chapter with sacred centers.